This is the special work session of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge. Today's Tuesday, January 18th, and it is 7:32 p.m. Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
This meeting, we'll do the statement on remote meetings. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to the COVID-19 pandemic and is in compliance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act and associated regulations. Notice of this meeting was published in the Bergen Record on January 8th, 2022, posted on the front doors of Borough Hall and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial-in and login information necessary for public participation to access this meeting remotely. Although I don't, a copy of the agenda for this meeting was made available on the borough's website via the posting of the meeting notice and included the dial-in and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you'd like to make, I don't know, we're necessarily going to have any public comments during this work session, so we'll dispose with that section of the notice. So with that, Ms. Stilly, I turn over to you if you would kindly call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Ms. Boland,
Here.
Mr. Merman,
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer.
Here.
Mr. Cray is absent at the moment. Mr. Eric Kellion, also absent at the moment. Councilman Kinigo,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Grasso is excused, and Mr. Esposito.
Here.
Okay, also present are Mr. Behrens, the board planner, and myself, Marina Steinley.
Thank you for that. Okay, so picking up where we left off at our last work session, December 8th, which we dove into a variety of topics among which we got into the discussion about, and we started off with pools and we started talking about really enforcement of a variety of things as it relates to lot coverage. And I think a lot of it was sort of dovetailing into that general topic by itself. So, and I think as the board saw from Mr. Gibbons, there was a meeting of the subcommittee last night, and some items were discussed amongst that subcommittee. And I think it probably makes sense at this point to try to tie in a lot of what we started talking about, and as I said, where we wound up going into the lot coverage discussion. I think it probably would be best at this juncture to bring in the subcommittee and have them give us an update on what they discussed at their meeting last evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gibbons.
Well, Ms. Boland was the head of that committee, so
Okay.
if you
Yeah,
want to take the lead, and I'll give my
So-
2 cents. Sorry.
That's fine. Yep.
My apologies. I'll turn to Miss Boland and let her get things started.
Yeah, no leader in the group really, but we did concentrate mostly our discussions with lot coverage because that seems to be the issue that we face with majority of our applications. And Mr. Gibbons used his connections to prepare a list of the lot sizes in the borough and the number of lots for the categories. So I'd like him really to discuss that as far as the sizes, how many we have, how many are the most affected by the coverage, and explain where we went with of reasonable coverages or reasonable things people would expect to have, and what they need to work with based on their lot coverages. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Sure. I hope I can share my screen here. Yeah, it looks like I can. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. I did send this to Mr. Caslin earlier, but I didn't really want to send this to the full group. Sorry, you're looking at my email here. I didn't want to send this out to the full group yet without context. And I can share a link in the chat and I can send it out to everyone via email. But can everyone see a Google Sheet here on my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to shift everybody around so I can see this as best I can. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so what I did, and I'm going to preface this with the amount of homes might not be 100% accurate, but what I did is I went into the tax record and I found that the amount of houses that were undersized, and then I went and looked at the houses that were oversized as well. So what I wanted to try and see is how we can help the undersized lots have what's currently becoming more acceptable or more needed in houses, and that being a shed and a deck / patio. So if you follow with me here, what I did is, so this first line, you'll see lot size. So this is houses that are 5,000 square feet and under. And according to the tax record, there's about 145 houses. Again, might be a little more, might be a little less, but it's a pretty good gauge of the houses that we have on these lots. And if those properties were to cover their property as allowed of 35%, it would be about 1,750 square feet. Okay. And what I was looking at was the impact of allowing those people to have a deck and a shed. And just Googling, found, on Google, it was the average size deck was about 300 to 400 square feet. Okay. So not going to say that's the average in town, but that's an average size deck for deck or patio building. So if we were to allow someone to have an average size deck, and I just used 400, and an average size shed, which came out to about an 8x10 shed, I think is a reasonable size shed. So if we were to say that comes up to about 480 square feet. So I want to see how much of an impact that has and what percentages that brings us to. So we just use this 5,000 square foot lot, starts out as 1,750 square feet, allowable under the current laws. If we were to allow a deck and a shed, as I've mentioned, it would bring it to 2,230, and that would result in a 44.6% coverage. And that's about 145 homes. So I did that math for general numbers up into what is a typical, what the ordinance projects of what we want as a 7,500 square foot lot. So I did those same numbers, 5,500, 6,000, 6,500. And you can see, obviously, the percentage goes down, obviously, because that square foot is less of a percentage on a 7,500 square foot lot as it is a 5,000 square foot lot. And the reason I went through this is I wanted to see how we can help the undersized lots in town have what's become more acceptable in a house, having a deck and having a shed. And I wanted to see if we can come up with either an agreement of, will we allow things to happen on undersized lots, or talk to the mayor and council if possible, some sort of recommendation on coming up with some sort of a relief for the houses that are undersized. And you will see too that this, again, generally affects about 1,500 houses in town. As these houses are being built, we're seeing a lot more houses that are either being redone by homeowners or becoming flips. And obviously they're becoming in front of our board. The builder comes in, puts the house at 34.99% without a deck, without a shed, without a double driveway. And then they have to come to us for the help. And I wanted to try and come up with some framework, some sliding scale, something that we can be happy with that is going to help the people that are undersized. I'm not advocating for, pushing for all of these numbers, but it's just a general idea to give us, what we could be working with, and what might be needed or requested from residents. Does anyone have any questions of what I've put up here? Clarification on anything? No.
No.
And then on the bottom, what I did, just out of curiosity, is I looked at the oversized lots, and just to show what they're, not that, we're always allowing the 40%, but it tends to be our threshold as this group of what that increase would be on different size houses, on different size lots in town. And with that, then you get to see the general number of houses and then what that effect is. So, on a 12,000 square foot lot, 5% is 600 square feet, where on an undersized lot, 480 square feet is almost 10%. So just kind of give you an idea of where, how much that affects, how every little foot affects the smaller properties. I'd like to have some discussion on what people think about this. If there's, openness to having some sort of sliding scale of doing something to help the undersized lots.
Ryan, let me add one thing also that we talked about last night that dovetails into this.
Mhm.
There had been some discussion with the board regarding driveways and the ability to have 2 cars in the driveway. And so if and when we make any adjustments on the percentage allowed coverage of we would also have to take into account that we are probably going to somehow regulate a greater amount of parking coverage. So just keep that in mind, that there's something other than decks and sheds, driveways and large driveways are going to slip in there also.
Yeah, and we discussed this as well. It just, it's a next level conversation of, again, we're having these builders that are coming in and putting them at 34.99 and leaving nothing else. And we'd like to see some sort of language in the ordinance that, and I don't know the percentage that we've been talking about, but let's just say a homeowner or a developer is increasing the home size by 25%. So they're adding a level or they're going over the garage or whatever. To require them to have either an allowance in the square footage of the lot for an average size deck, 300 or 400 square foot deck, and require a double wide driveway, to prevent them fitting as much house as they possibly can and then leave the homeowner to fix those things. So finding a way of forcing the builders really of making them have a double wide and either having a deck or a patio finished in their plans or not building the property to 35%, building it to 32% or whatever is needed, and allowing, without having to come for a variance, the buyer of that house to not have to come to the board and not have to give that relief so they can, so they can build a bigger house. Because that's becoming, we're seeing a lot of new houses and we are seeing a lot of current residents not able to afford the $1.3 million new house. So they're taking their Cape Cods and their ranches and they're doing the work themselves, which is great because we don't want to lose the residents, but we need to make sure that they're not overbuilding as well. And kind of reel these things in a little bit and get a little more control, and make sure we're not putting more cars in the street and making sure that people have the outdoor space that they're going to want. They might not realize it when they buy the house, but they will realize it the first summer that they want to have a patio.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And also, if I could extend on the list, Ryan's numbers showing all the lots that are affected, and then also showing 35% build out where we don't really know what that 35% is. We did talk about typical coverages being allotted to different improvements. So a 2-car wide driveway with a 30-foot frontage, we attributed 600 square feet for a 20 by 30 driveway. Figuring if we wanted 2-car wide driveways, the 400 square foot deck and/or patio /patio, reasonable walkway, front walkway, at 60 square feet. That would be a 3-foot by 20-foot. And then the 80-foot square foot shed leaves us with 1,140 square feet reasonably needed above the 25% building coverage. So if you take the 5,000 square foot lot and they max out for building coverage, so that would be a 1,250 square foot, 25% footprint, or 2,500 square foot house, which seems reasonable, plus the 1,140, that brings us up to actually a 40, almost 48%, which obviously is very high. And that's if we're saying the 2-car wide driveway, a reasonable deck, the walkway, and the shed. If we made it a 1-car wide driveway for the smaller lots, that's taking away 300 square feet, and you had 42%. So you could get a 5,000 square foot lot, have reasonable coverage, but it would be a 1-car wide driveway and come in at 41.8 or 42%. And that seems to be, that's if they build out everything. A 2,500 square foot lot, building, with half of that being the footprint. And obviously that would be the highest and would work down for the other lot sizes. I did the same thing for a 6,000 square foot lot and came in with a double wide driveway, 2-car wide driveway at 44%. And then for a single car wide driveway at 39%. So, it's kind of tough. I know we like 40 square percent threshold, even for the smaller lots. But I'm just saying some of these small lots, it's proving that it's actually pretty difficult. The 35%, I don't know how it's been done other than, maybe paver patios weren't included, or, it really doesn't provide a lot of space for your basic driveway, walkway, and a patio. That's just something else to go out for everybody to think about.
So that's a good portion of what we talked about last night. And again, we'd like to have, some discussion, some opinions on this, some thoughts. I can take this off the screen and share it. I should be able to share it, a Google link, that everyone can look at it and digest it a little bit. And get an idea of, look at it for yourself. Again, I apologize for not sending it out ahead of time. I just didn't want to, I just wanted to give some context to it. So you understand what this really is. And I figured it was best to do that, in person. And we can explain it and talk through it. But I'm going to try to put this link in the chat. And I will, so it's in the chat, and then I will email it out to everyone so you can look at it in your leisure. But, welcome any thoughts, ideas, opinions in any direction.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pfeffer.
Thank you. So first, I'd really like to thank the committee. I know Ryan and Eileen. I'm not sure who else was on the committee, but
It was Dick.
Mr. Merman.
oh, okay, Mr. Merman. Yeah, just for putting all that together and for putting so much thought into this. I think that Excel sheet really helped a lot, at least for me, to visualize the situation. My suggestion at this point is only that we look at 2 categories of housing in River Edge. One being existing housing and the other being new construction. And the reason why I feel that we should separate the conversation that way is because I think with the new construction, there's really a problem, a serious problem, I think, with people buying their houses and not fully understanding what the limitations are on the property that they're buying. And when you have builders who are building right up to the limit, and buyers are being told, maybe by brokers or even by the builder, that you could put in a deck, you could put in a pool, you could do whatever you want with the property once you buy it, that's really an unfair situation. I think that's really an injustice to buyers who, come in after the house is built or after it's mostly built, and they just don't know. As opposed to existing owners who at least, they have their houses, and if they want to add something to the house, they could look into it and find out what the rules are. So I would kind of like to separate it out into those two categories. And, while I like the idea of some kind of sliding scale for smaller lot sizes, I'm not wedded to any particular numbers. So I'd like to hear what other people have to say about the numbers. But I do like the concept of trying to sort of, have a sliding scale, basically. But as far as new construction, I think that we really, I do like the suggestion that Ryan offered of having certain limitations up front with the builders, and really have some restrictions that prevent the building of a house all the way up to the limit, knowing that, at least from experience, most people want to add other features. And we either require them to put those features in, like a patio and a double wide driveway, or we just, reduce the amount of lot that they can build on and leave it up to whoever buys the house to decide whether they want to add those features or not. Either way, I think is okay with me, but I just think that we really need to address that problem as a separate category of housing, so that we don't have that situation where builders just build up to the limit, then walk away from the property, and the buyer beware. But the buyer can't beware because they're being told, they're sometimes being given misinformation, and if the house is already built, they're stuck. So those would be my comments on it, and I hope that makes sense.
No, and that's my concern as well. I mean, I'm sure Jim would corroborate this. No buyer that I've ever had has asked me what the percentage is that River Edge will allow if I want to add a pool. Now they might say, can I add a pool, and I'll give them direction. But no buyer in 10 years of real estate has ever asked me, so how much coverage do I have left? Because they just don't know. They have no clue that there are laws most of the time. And if they do, they don't understand that they're not going to be able to put that deck in. So, I think we need to have some sort of, you must have a 2-car wide driveway and a patio, or a reduction of whatever that needs to be, with the numbers that Eileen gave, and then, a backyard. We have to protect people because they have no clue. And unfortunately, to put down my profession, a lot of the realtors have no clue either. So,
Nor do they want to have a clue.
Right.
They just want to, they want to make the sale.
Right.
It is an inherited problem. I've sold a couple newer houses in town, and I've looked at it, and there are some that I can't even believe are within that 35-foot limit. There's one going up down the block from me now. I don't even know how they're getting 35, less than 35 or less than 35 coverage on that house. It's huge on not that big of a piece of property. But yeah, no, I agree with Ryan 100%. It's definitely an issue, and the builders are taking advantage of the situation.
One of the other things we discussed to help towards that for the new construction is adding a deck or patio to be included as part of the building coverage versus the overall lot coverage. So when they build out the house at 25%, that should include a deck or patio, and then the remaining 10%, there's more that they could do with the driveway and other things, because the deck and or patio or porches are already in that initial 25%. They can't build a house to 25% and then need a deck and patio. The deck and patio, and it kind of falls in with our definition already in the ordinance where they talk about building area. It does mention porches and open deck as far as building area. So it's not unrealistic to include for new construction to require that as part of the initial 25% building coverage, leaving more room for the rest of the coverage.
So let me ask a question. Bruce, what do you envision as new construction? How would you
Well,
characterize that?
Ryan touched on it. It's something we could talk about, but maybe 25% even of a,
Yeah, I don't know what that definition should be. I mean, I just threw out, adding 25% square footage to the home. Maybe it needs to be 50. I don't know. I'm not married to a number. But it's a real add-on, not just doing reno to your house, of adding real square footage. Should trigger something like this.
As well as just ground up construction. Obviously.
It's tough to say that, me buying this house and Bruce buying this house, that I'm a developer and he's not, so I think there has to be some sort of additional square footage to the home idea to trigger something like this. And again, I don't know what that number is. I picked 25%. I would think that could be, adding a level to a Cape Cod or something like that would be a minimum of 25%. But I don't think you can call it quote unquote new construction, because what is new construction? You could leave up a wall and it's still the same old house. You
Right.
could add a level and it's still the same old house, but we know what you're doing. So I think there has to be some sort of additional square footage to trigger something like this.
It's the know it when you see it argument.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, as the one who reviews these applications, it does become difficult without a strong definition to discern what is new versus existing. And a lot of times that gets convoluted with the building code, where a developer will go, well, no, it says in the building code that this is an alteration. It's not new construction. Then you go in circles about if it's new or not. So you definitely need something that's not arbitrary and very clear in terms of what it is. And probably, as simple of a calculation as you could possibly have for this type of thing. What I'm not understanding is that, so let's say,
frozen.
I think you broke up there.
He's just getting to the punchline too.
Yeah.
Hey, he's
Yeah,
frozen.
let's give Tom a chance to come back.
By the way, I just want to apologize for getting on late. I did not again get the Zoom link sent to me, so it kept putting me in as a guest. I kept having to get out, try to get hold of Mr. Alter, and we finally got it working, but so I apologize for coming on late. So I am flying a little blind because I missed Ryan's presentation. I wonder, and I guess this question would go to Tom, and he's back.
He's back.
So my question is, this thing where the builder comes in and he knocks the house down and keeps up a wall and then calls it a renovation. Is there any way, is that part of our local code, or is that part of the
we
NURL, or?
don't really have anything in the local code that pertains mostly to the building code, what alteration versus new construction. There is a provision of the code that says if that more than 50% of the house is removed intentionally or by an act of God, that when you replace it, it has to adhere to the zoning ordinance. But there's nothing else that says what's new or, existing and the like.
Jim, just if you want to look back, I put in the chat, and I apologize. I saw your text well after you had joined the meeting. I put in the chat a link to a Google sheet. And basically I was just looking at a sliding scale of allowing a reasonable size deck and a shed. So a reasonable size deck per my Google search was about 400 square feet. a deck or a shed is 8 by 10-ish, so 80 square feet. So figuring out a percentage that would allow people to have those two things that they really want and need nowadays, even when the house has been maxed out. So it just kind of goes through the numbers, and I went through the tax record and found that there are, 145 5,000 square foot lots, and
I'll go
gotta
back
break
and watch, I'll go back and watch the recording when we're done. When it's posted up and catch up with that. So I don't want to waste everybody's
I
time.
can chat with you about it if you want. We can talk.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan.
When I froze earlier, the question that I was asking, so let's say you have something that's classified as new construction, would they have a separate coverage figure that they would have to adhere to as compared to an existing house? Or I wasn't understanding the concept in terms of differentiating the two.
Whether a deck or a patio would be then be considered building coverage versus being left for the rest for the lot coverage. So it's
Okay.
coverage no matter what, but being
Right.
absorbed in the building coverage then leaves more for the driveways, the walkways.
Right.
And then you're not maxing out your building and leaving nothing for everything else.
Right. And Ms. Boland, you touched on it. The experience is that developers max out the building to 25%. You have a driveway that's at least 18 feet or 20 feet wide, and then there's nothing left. And,
Right.
even then, they're probably over the 35% on a smaller lot. So
Right.
it
This
is
would
what it is.
Take into account the deck or patio as part of that original 25% where they can't max out and then leave nothing where people would expect to have something in their backyard.
I wonder if having, let's say, a 5%, not an allowance, but where they have to reserve 5% of the total coverage for rear yard amenities, which could be a patio, deck, shed, pool, whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
was
I
looking at it as an either or. So you either have to have that done and completed at the end when they get their CO, that they have to have a reasonable sized deck / patio and the double wide, or yes. So whether it be 5%, although on a 5,000 square foot lot, 5% wouldn't be enough. So you'd need,
Was that
So-
250 square feet?
you would need, I mean, if we're going to go off my calculations, you would need 480-ish square feet left for the shed and I don't know, Ms. Boland was mentioning, I don't know that we can really, can we force a double wide on a 50 by 100 lot?
I think we're really pushing up coverage. If we do
So
that.
maybe a double wide driveway, there's a threshold there at a certain level, you need that. But I think we have to force it, especially on the newer construction or the houses that are turning from a cape to 3,000 square feet, that they're adding these things in, that we're making sure that we have these amenities so the next homeowner doesn't have to then come to us, and I would imagine a lot of the people that are building these properties for themselves don't necessarily realize that when it's done, they can't just throw a patio in the back.
Right. I would agree. Most people have no idea what the
No.
and it's their first time ever buying a piece of property or renovating their home. And that's been my experience. I think this also ties into a parking situation that we're having, in that we don't require garages, or that you have these large houses being blown up with, undersized garages that exist in the Cape that was built in the 50s, with a 9-foot by, 18-foot garage, which isn't really standard by today's standards. And so, I think looking at the garage requirement, also, I think the issue of the double wide driveway is a double-edged sword, in that if, let's say, you require them for every single lot, now you're getting rid of all that green space, and you're by default creating extra impervious coverage and not giving homeowners the choice. So I just want to, maybe not have it be a requirement, but homeowners could have that option. To have a double wide driveway if they want. Some houses may have 1 car, some may have none, some may have 5. So, it may vary in that regard, but we allow up to 22 feet wide now. My driveway that I have is 16.5 feet wide, and it is not wide enough for 2 cars. We can barely squeeze them in. So the sweet spot seems to be like 18 to 22 for a double wide driveway.
Councilman?
Ryan and committee, thank you so much for the work you did. It was enlightening, to say the least. And as a concept, I'm for everything that is being discussed here, because I think that these are real problems that our constituents face, and these are real solutions. The one concern I have, though, is flooding. If we are talking about allowing all this extra coverage, not only the driveways, but the decks and sheds everywhere, and everybody suddenly goes out and does the work, we are now facing flooding problems in River Edge that we're going to have to start really dealing with over the next several years. We need some input from somebody as to how these possible changes would impact River Edge specifically, and the issues that we have with floods. I think the mayor can speak much more eloquently than I can on these issues, but that's the first thing that popped to mind when we started talking about the possible increase of lot coverage, which again, I understand. I've got a small lot myself, so it's something that there's some work I certainly would like to do, but I'm precluded from doing. But I also don't want my basement to be flooding every day, and it's a battle I fight every year. So these are thoughts we have to have and questions we have to ask. Thank you.
Mayor.
So, yes, outstanding work. Thank you. Thanks to the committee. Thanks to the thoughtful discussion we're currently having. Councilman Kinigo's right. We do have a flooding problem, and these flooding problems are getting worse. South part of town, Voorhees, Kensington, the park, Memorial Park, and what was a storm drain system that was built that really handled the issues is no longer able to do it. And it's not just that the entire town is flooding. We're getting some summer storms that are dropping so much water that there are 2 or 3 locations in town where flooding happens within an hour period. And nowhere else is there flooding. It's because the storm drain system was built 100 years ago or 75 years ago, and it can't handle the amount of water coming down in an hour or 2, especially in these summer storms. So we do have to be very mindful of this. My question is this, and maybe you answered it and I just wasn't understanding it. And this goes to the committee. On the spreadsheet, you're talking about column number 4 or D, percent of coverage resulting. And we're talking about 44.60% all the way to, okay, somehow, oh good, all the way to 41.40%. Is the committee recommending that we make those the new standards in our zoning, or are they or is the committee recommending that these would be our maximum numbers as we consider? So more of a guideline than a change in our ordinance or in our zoning.
For me personally, I just wanted to present this idea. I didn't know the best way to do it. None of us are saying that these are exact numbers that we want. It's more just, this would be the impact. So personally, I don't know what the best way of doing it would be. My concern with, kind of a gentleman's ladies agreement saying that we're good with these numbers, if and when this board turns over, does that policy change? I don't have a simple answer of we're definitely not set on these numbers per se, but I don't know the best course of action to implement it.
So maybe this would help discussion if I rephrased it or reframed it. My concern is this. Say we decided, and not necessarily these numbers, but say we decided to change the maximum lot coverage from 35% for 5,000 square feet to a larger number. And we did that, it could be 44.6, it could be something else. Now what happens is once someone gets to 44.6, they come to the land use board in the future and they say, well, I need more than 44.6. So my thinking is that we really don't want to change the 35% that is currently our law or our statute, our ordinance. But it would be my understanding that we would have a gentleman's agreement or ladies agreement, that we would be a little bit more generous in our understanding without any obligation. And of course, every land use board every year can reconsider how that's impacting the town, given what's going on in the town at the time. So I don't know necessarily whether those numbers would be something we wanted to change by ordinance or not. But the other questions of the 5% reserve for patio or deck, or some sort of garage requirement that actually fits modern cars, or the double wide driveway, those are things that I think would move towards ordinance or some sort of change in what we have in our land use law. Would everyone agree with that, disagree with that? I'm wondering.
I just have one caveat just to add to the previous discussion, and we can go from there.
Yeah.
My thought on if it was an ordinance with the first, with the grid that I did, my thought would be for only those two reasons. That the only way that you would be allowed to go to one of those numbers if it had been adopted would be to add a deck / patio and a shed. I wouldn't want this to be used to add a pool and then to come back, like you said, now I need a deck to put on my pool, and now I need a shed to put in my pool equipment. So I would push any way that we slice this, whether it's a gentleman's agreement or it's an ordinance, that if we are allowing these things to be added, it is for the, quote unquote, needed things in 2022. So I just want to put that in there and leave it for discussion for everyone else.
If I could chime in, I'll let Mr. Pfeffer go first.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I caution the board with having sort of an unwritten code by which the board goes by. And I think even sticking to the 40% threshold that we have now is sort of an unwritten rule. It could potentially get the board in trouble at some point in the future. So if there is a desire or a demonstrated need to increase the permitted coverage, it should be done by ordinance, or it should be left and just be reviewed on a case-by-case basis with no absolute threshold. And I don't know, Maureen, if you have any thoughts about that. I just see
Yes.
us heading down a road where we get in trouble at some point in time, because for obvious reasons, people are paying attention, and in accordance with the law, it is, fairly strict in terms of how you're supposed to evaluate these things, and what you do for one, you have to do for all, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, I would echo that and advise against any sort of unwritten rules that the board has. We do review each application individually based on the individual factors and circumstances that arise in each property. And although there are some things that are similar in neighborhoods and between properties, the board has to look at each property individually. And if the board wants to have different standards for smaller lots, larger lots, or make any changes, that has to be in an ordinance. So then we can consistently apply the rules to all of the property owners in the town.
So Marina, it would be legal for us to create different lot coverage for different sizes. Is that what you're saying? That would be legal?
Yes. Other towns do have similar sliding scales, I guess.
Right, but that's very common, and we have, and River Edge has it for the side yard setback. For the narrower lots, have some leeway. I think it was pointed out at the last meetings, Mrs. Boland, I think, had done an analysis of what other Bergen County towns permit for similar sized lots. It does seem like 35% is low. What the correct number is, that's up for discussion. I think there's some evidence of where it could head, but I think you do kind of back your way into it based on, the driveway figures, the decks, et cetera. But again, that you have to, this is a balancing act too, in terms of considering other things that are going on in town.
So if that's the case, then I'd like to pose another question to our professionals. If this body chose to think about a 5% reserve for patios or decks or a garage requirement or a double wide driveway requirement, let me see if I can phrase this correctly. Could we say that any construction which changed the footprint would immediately fall under those requirements? Because, and where I'm getting at is new construction versus renovation. Well, if you leave one wall up, it's a renovation. And the truth of the matter is, there was a construction done on Howland, and they left one wall up, and then the wall fell down. So they went to 4 walls, and but they increased the footprint. So is it legal to simply say that if they increase the footprint, these reserves, these garage requirements, and or double wide driveway would be legal or not?
I don't know if Tom has any examples similar of other, or if you've seen other examples in other towns like that. I'm not aware of anything with respect to like a change in footprint triggering a new requirement.
Right. The technical answer is you probably could legally do that. In practice, like Marina said, I don't know of anyone or any town that currently does that. In theory, you could. But like most of what I've seen is just a straight, 35%, or whatever the case may be. And, if you have a lot of a certain size, that's what you have to work with, and that's it.
So for the board's understanding why I'm bringing this up is, if this body decides to recommend this to the council, and the council should make these changes, and a builder says, well, 5% would now be reserved if I do that, so why leave one wall up? And now I don't have to worry about the 5%. They sell it to someone else, and they've maxed out the lot size. I mean, that seems to be a scenario that we'd have to be concerned about.
Mayor, just to be clear, you're talking about in the case where we're differentiating new construction versus an alteration or
And
addition.
isn't new construction where all 4 walls come down, but renovation is where they only have 3 walls come down?
It's new constructions, like almost every brick is removed, where an alteration is a tiny sliver of the foundation can remain. It's a very bizarre rule from my standpoint, but it is what it is.
I
Mr. Gibbon.
completely get where you're going, Mr. Mayor, and I think that's why I think we need to look at it as a certain percentage, whether the footprint changes or the square footage of the home changes, and not leave it for that, because then every builder will figure it out and work around it. And we also want to make sure that the current homeowners, because like I said earlier, a lot of people are taking their own capes and building them up because they can't afford the new construction, so they have to do it themselves. And we need to make sure that they're doing it right, not just the builders. Is that legal to have, use 25%? If you increase your property, if you increase the size of the home by 25%, then we can trigger X, Y, and Z. And is that something that other towns have done?
Technically, you probably could do it. It makes the review process a little more cumbersome, but it could be done. And when you say it triggers XYZ, what exactly would it trigger? Would it trigger a lower coverage requirement, or
what we've been talking about? You have to have space for a patio, double wide, any and all of these things that we've been talking about,
right,
to trigger that, to make sure that they're added so the homeowner, the next homeowner or whoever owns it, doesn't come back for a patio.
My lawyer sense is tingling here because all I can see is lawsuits coming. Hey, I need to add a bedroom upstairs for my new baby, and now you're making me add a driveway, and you're making me add a garage, and you're making me do all these things. All I need is a bedroom, and so.
But to have the space on the property for it, I don't think anyone's going to make you put in a driveway or a patio, but you'd need to have the coverage on the property without
Almost like-
going for a
Almost like
variance.
land banking it essentially.
get those
land
things.
banking.
But I can't
Right,
get the second floor unless I have enough space to possibly put a driveway? How
Yeah.
does the second floor affect anything else? Why am I not being allowed to put that second floor on my house? It's just straight up, just like my neighbors. They have the second floor and they're twice as big as me. Twice as big as me. And all I need is an extra bedroom upstairs. And you're telling me now I gotta have enough space for a driveway that I'm never gonna put in. Forget it, man. I'll see you in Superior Court. Explain it to a judge how this, solves any of the issues here in River Edge. I'm just thinking like, I would, if I were that possible claimant. Look, honestly, I think that the system that we have in place here is an excellent system. When people need to make changes, they come to this board, and this board has been has worked very hard to give everybody their day and their say, but to keep River Edge the way it is, which is special. If we start allowing these extra, lot coverages, and we start demanding that, new construction be added here, there, and it loses the character of this town, which I think a lot of people are concerned with, and I don't think we should, lose sight of that. So I just want to caution everybody, and I know you guys think about all this stuff very carefully, but I think you guys are doing a great job. I don't know that you need to change anything drastically here.
And
I'd
look,
like
and
to
that-
chime in just for a second, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Sure.
So I've been around for a while here. And it wasn't long ago when we had two boards in town. We had a planning board and a zoning board, and then they were merged. And I was given the pleasure of helping mesh that together. So certainly we've become a lot more busy than we used to, because the zoning board would hear the zoning issues, the planning board would hear the planning issues. And now we're almost at a steady 2 meetings a month. And I understand that whole scenario. But I agree with Councilman Caningo, where it's working for us. And we have a significant say in what these people are doing. I feel bad that they're being hoodwinked by some of the builders. But I don't know if making these kind of changes to the land use ordinances we have in town are going to be productive. I think taking everything on a case by case basis, and I agree we should kind of hold back from comments such as, well, my threshold is 40%, and we usually do 40%, because I know some of the attorneys, especially some of the local attorneys, are picking up on that and letting their clients know that. So we need to address that with some of these local attorneys and tell them, don't expect you're going to get 40% when you walk in the door. It's on a case by case basis. But I agree with Councilman Caningo on this, that I don't see too much of this broke. I haven't seen it over the last 4 or 5 years when we merged the two boards. And I didn't see it even before that, when we were separate, because I used to tune in occasionally to the zoning board meetings. So that's my comment. I appreciate all the work that the committee did. And some of those are great guides for us moving forward in deciding our cases. But like Councilman Caningo said, to require somebody to reserve enough land for a driveway they're never going to use. I mean, on my house, I could fit 4 cars from front to back, because I happen to have a deep lot for River Edge. Why would I ever want to go sideways with it? So that's just my thought process. That's it. Good.
Yeah, and Bruce, I'll come back to you in a second. I don't want
Okay.
you have something to say. But I think we come back to it. These are important questions, and there comes a time in any sort of process where you have to stop and ask, is there a better way of doing something?
Yeah.
And I think these are all, at the end of the day, we may end up deciding as a board that, we're not, we do have as good a process as any that is working, in the sense that it's giving people the relief that they're seeking, while also trying to I think the word that was used earlier, and I think that's a key word, is balance. Balancing the needs of the town versus the needs of the residents in terms of trying to do what they want to do to enjoy their own properties and their residences, and that's what makes a vibrant community. And in that regard, I think one of the things we should probably think about too is, are there tweaks to be made here and there, and maybe, I know we've touched on this before, and something to think about would be, are there new technologies that are coming about that where we may be able to change, like for a driveway, for example, it may not be a paved driveway, maybe it's, I'm throwing this out here just as a thought, not as a statement, and I'll turn it back to Bruce. But, maybe as an example, driveways don't have to be paved, but maybe it's crushed stone so that, there's not a drainage situation there. It's not impervious coverage, but yet it gets cars off the street and people are allowed to park, have parking on their own property. That's just one example I'm kind of thinking of, and off the top of my head. And with that, Bruce, I know you had something to say, so let me turn it to you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think it's a great discussion, and I'm really I'm impressed that everybody is putting so much good thought into it and creative thought, and that'll lead to some good outcome eventually. I just want to maybe pull us back to how we got to this question to begin with, and I think it brings us back to what the problem is with doing things on a case-by-case basis. While I respect especially people who have been doing this on this board for a long time, we have seen, and I've just seen in the last year, how the case-by-case method is creating problems. It's creating problems for us as a board, and it's creating problems for the residents, because we're constantly faced with people, with applicants who come to us and say, well, you did it for the last guy, so how come you can't do it for me? And then we're in this position of trying to explain it and defend it, and we're not always sure ourselves whether it's what's fair and what's the right thing to do. So it creates a problem for us. It also creates a problem for the residents, because they don't have that predictability. They don't have a sense of what the rule is. And when you have that kind of atmosphere and that kind of environment, then you have a situation where people will also go to court and say, you treated my neighbor one way and you treated me differently. Why is that? What's really going on here, that I don't get the 2% extra, but he got the 2% extra. So that too is, and maybe, obviously there's no perfect situation. If people want to sue, they're going to sue. And you could come up with all kinds of reasons to sue. But I'm just pointing out that doing things on a case-by-case basis is also causing problems for us. And that's why I think we got to this point and why this is on the agenda. So I would just, throw out another idea to chew on. And I like Chris's idea, maybe we need to be a little creative and not too rigid with how we want the property to be used. And just taking off of that, I would say maybe one way to approach this is to create limits on what builders can build, right? So there's this extra space that's always allowed, but we don't require that it be a patio or a driveway, and we don't say that it, you have to do the double driveway, therefore you can't add the bedroom, right? But we have this extra surplus space in a sense, and leave it to the owner how they want to apply that. I'm thinking in terms of, like, in New York City, they have air rights where you can take airspace from an adjacent building and add it to your building. And so in a similar, this would be a similar concept where you have this extra space around your house. How you use it can be up to you. You want to build a bedroom and have a narrow driveway? that's fine. As long as it fits within the percentages and the square feet that we're allowing. And then the last thing I'll say is this: I think having a more, for lack of a better word, a more rigid system is preferable to doing things case by case. And you could say rigid, or you could say predictable, or you could say consistent. But whatever we call it, I think it's preferable because it takes the guesswork out of it. And I think it might actually prevent potential litigation in the future, because instead of saying, well, we gave 40% last time, let's give 41% this time, or 39% this time, we can say, look, we discussed it. These are the rules that we adopted. These are the formulas. These are the percentages. And now we're going to apply it, and we're going to apply it consistently across the board. So I think it makes it easier for us, but it also makes it more fair for the residents who come before us. There's more predictability in the system. Thank you.
Councilman, I think you had a hand up at one point.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said, Bruce, but I also disagree with everything you said. That's a joke.
I somehow understand that.
No, in all seriousness, everything you're saying is correct, except that 5 years from now, we're going to have the same problem, because people are going to say, look, 40%, but I need a little more. And, right now we have those numbers in place. We have the 25% and the 35% in place, and we allow people to come. We can't get rid of variances. I don't think that we can get rid of the requesting a variance system. So that means that people are going to come, and maybe we're not going to be on this board. Maybe it's going to be, a set of new individuals who say, yeah, you know what, 40% is fine, 42% is fine, 45%. And then all of a sudden, no disrespect to Bergenfield, but we start looking a little more like Bergenfield than, this little oasis just 9 miles away from the biggest city in the world. So I think that's what we're looking at. That's why I say keep the numbers and keep going on a case-by-case basis. And I think if we turn it around, we are going to get increased lawsuits. I don't think we've had a lot of lawsuits on these subject matters. So I think that what we've been doing has been very effective, and it's been working very well. And I think that when people say, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to sue you, well, they're going to go back to the YouTube tapes and watch the thoughtful discussions that this board has on every single one of the cases that are brought before it, and show, and this board has allowed people to withdraw their application and come back. This board has allowed people to take a couple of weeks and come up with alternatives that we might consider. So I think all these things kind of show us that it's been working. But again, I do agree with a lot of what you said. So I'm not trying to just put down on you, but I'm very, I don't know, I feel very strongly that this board has been very effective, and the way everything's been done has been very good for this town. So, I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
And I'm just going to add that I don't believe in the last 25 years we've ever had a lawsuit to fix something that we've said yes or no to. Marina, am I mistaken?
I'm not aware of any, so let's hope aren't any coming down the pipeline. My only comments to add to the discussion so far is possibly considering how the borough defines lot coverage and improved lot coverage, since we have the two different numbers, 25% maximum lot coverage, 25 and 35% maximum improved lot coverage. This is just for the R1 zone. But if the borough limits or expands what is considered lot coverage or improved lot coverage, that can cover, I think, some of the concerns that are being raised. Because right now, the improved lot coverage definition is lot area improved with principal and accessory buildings, structures, and uses, including but not limited to driveways, parking areas, garages, and other man-made improvements. But lot coverage definition is a portion of a lot occupied by buildings, accessory structures, not including walkways, driveways, patios, and open parking spaces. So there already is built into the code set lot coverage for building and structures and set lot coverage, improved lot coverage for all the extra things. So I think that's something that the board could consider how things should be divided up. I don't know if Tom has any.
I would agree
comments.
that the definitions could definitely be stronger and, you could draw the line on different things. I think it is, we call it lot coverage. A lot of other towns call it building coverage. It's really the same thing. It includes the dwelling, anything with a roof, usually decks, sheds and, structures essentially. And then you have improved lot coverage, which other towns may refer to as impervious coverage, which aren't necessarily the same, but in our town, it basically means anything, lists a number of things and then anything else man-made, it's kind of a catch-all, which sort of ropes in pools, sports courts and anything else that might be perceived as man-made and doesn't have many exemptions. So that the definitions could be something to look at. And, I think it does go back to, are the numbers correct? And maybe that's something as a board, either determine that, yes, this is what they should be and that's it. Or if there's flexibility at all. And then we could also look at these definitions. And I'll note that the terms are somewhat antiquated. And in the whole ordinance, for instance, we don't have the word deck. So it definitely needs to be updated in some regard to address modern amenities, which it doesn't, air conditioning units, generators and the like, certain things that are almost, at every single household aren't even mentioned once in the ordinance. So I think we have some updating to do. I think Marina's comment is valid. So those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
So Tom, would that be the work of the committee? Would that be the work of you? Would that be the work of Marina? Would that be a work of some combination of the such? If what we're going to do is strengthen our definitions and maybe tweak a few things in order for something to get done, what would be, in your opinion, Tom, the most efficient way to move forward? Should you create some ideas and send it to the committee? Should you meet with the committee? Should Marina and you meet? How would you recommend we move forward?
Okay, I don't want to steal any thunder from the committee. So if certainly, you have some bright people, if they want to tackle that, I wouldn't take that away. But I think Marina and I could probably come up with some suggestions. And that could also be in tandem with the subcommittee, more minds are better than one or two. So I think having a menu or a range of options at this point probably makes sense. And then we would come back and the full board could, think about what the best option would be or options would be to move forward. And it could be range from do nothing or we make modifications to this and that, as needed, based on the issues we've had.
So maybe the thing to do is with your breadth of expertise, Tom and Marina, is to sort of be the point of departure and bring in sort of a starting point for the committee then to consider and add in their experience and their expertise and try to elaborate on your initial gatherings of changes or proposed changes that you come up with. Mr. Mayor,
Okay,
if
yep.
you have a different thought on that.
No, I think that's my thought. A best practice would be to have Marina and Tom sit down, discuss what we discussed, come up with some sort of framework, send the framework back to the committee, have the committee, process that framework, and then the committee can decide whether they want to come back to a workshop meeting or they want to bring it to a decision-making committee. Because I think there have been outstanding ideas presented here, but there are also difficulties, there are also encumbrances. So I just think at this point, we need legal minds and professional minds to process what we've said and then send it back to the committee. That's my thought, for whatever it's worth.
Councilman?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mayor, aren't we having ordinances reviewed by a company right now? Aren't we in the process of doing that as well? Having all our ordinances reviewed?
Yes and no. Their scope is much too narrow to be looking at this is my understanding.
Okay.
You and I could have a conversation with our BA about that, but I believe that their scope of what they're doing would not include what we're talking about now.
Okay, that's fine. I know we were doing something. I wasn't quite sure the extent of the scope.
They're
I didn't
looking
want to
for
get-
us for things in our ordinances that are outdated, things that maybe have become illegal because of state statute or changing in things like that.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense as a next step. And I think in addition to that, it probably makes sense. We've had some very creative conversations here. I would almost suggest that we try to do a regular work session to try to get these things discussed, because we do come across things. I'm not saying it may not make sense to do it every month, but maybe quarterly or something along those lines, just to kind of bring this group together to have these types of discussions, because frankly, I think they're fruitful, and I think it'll help us, make things, improve things as we move along. Because it's as you see, some of the things we're dealing with are outdated. So probably, as our collective experiences come together, see areas where we can improve things here and there. Mr. Merman, you've been uncharacteristically quiet this evening.
The same thing.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you my summary, but before I do that, Mr. Chairman, when we get all done before you close this, I want to just speak to the board, okay? I think we all agree that we need and I'll call it a sliding scale to eliminate any punishment to the smaller lots. I think one of the, and it seems to be that we all concur or agree with that. One of the stumbling blocks in our agreement seems to be, and I'll call it implementation. Whether we come up with some informal guidelines and apply it that way on a case-by-case basis. And a guideline does not necessarily have to apply to all people, all the members. Each member might want to adjust it a little bit for their own outlook and preference. And that would be a guideline versus codifying somehow any kind of percentages that we might come up with. The one thing that, and I expect the newer members to be aware of this, one thing that a zoning board of adjustment, a ZBA, was created was to provide relief in the form of variances to the regular the codes, in this case, land use code. So we're in a way functioning by combining the boards, the planning board and a ZBA in calling it a land use board. We're really doing the function of a zoning board in issuing the variances. And I still, my other thing, which is sort of off on the side, is this one wall rule sort of effect. And I think that somehow we've got to, whatever we come up with, take that all separately and revise that, even if it just applies to River Edge somehow. So that's my summary of what I've heard. I think everybody does agree that we got to avoid harming or punishing the little guy, which is the small lot. And that's the end of my comments at this point.
Harry, any thoughts?
I do, but what happens here is that we have so much to do. The amount of time that we spend and things of that nature. We want everybody, I would think everybody gets together, pulls everything out and says, this is what we have to do to keep it within that amount. Not anybody going here or there or every other place. I'm listening, and actually I'm enjoying it because I've never heard most of this like this before. And as long as this thing continues, more and more of us are going to be, I think, a little bit happier and hope that it's done and that we all work together to make sure things are okay. Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? I think we've sort of hit a natural point where we're heading for 9 o'clock. So I think,
So I just want to say that, Chris, your idea of having a quarterly meeting is a great idea, a workshop meeting. I have come to believe over my years that the best thing to do is plan those meetings, and then if we don't need them, cancel them. So what I would recommend to this body is, because we can discuss these things outside of a application and therefore avoid the legal ramifications of, maybe saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. So I would recommend that this body consider putting 4 dates into the calendar for workshops. And then as the dates approach, we can decide whether or not we still want to do those meetings. That's my thought. I just wanted to say that because we didn't decide on whether we should have these meetings or not.
yeah, thank you. I figured we'd come full circle at some point to try to wrap things up for the evening. So, and I think probably that, this Tuesday in the calendar in between our meetings probably would work best, at least as a starting point. Seems to be we can get a critical mass of folks in place. So maybe we'll look to do something along those lines and try to put that as the starting date for setting up a schedule. Final thoughts and comments from anyone this evening? And everyone, floor is open.
Taking advantage of that, I just want to remind the board members that our next regular meeting, we have scheduled 2 applications. One is Powers and the other is Dunkin' Donuts. The Dunkin' Donuts is a really big project, a huge application, and it's probably going to wind up being contentious. My request to the board members is please review your application materials, acquaint yourself with the site, and be prepared. Be prepared, do your homework for this meeting, please. And I say that because it's my understanding that I'm going to have to chair the meeting, which is fine, but it's going to be a tough meeting. Okay, it's going to be a continuous meeting. This is not, in my estimate, going to be accomplished in one evening. I see it going at least 2 and maybe beyond. It all depends. So please be prepared. Review your documents. We still have documents that have not been submitted to us by our own professionals. We need reports from our individual reports from our professionals and all. So be aware that they're outstanding and probably going to come in at the last minute. So look for them, get acquainted with them, and think about them. So that's what I'm looking at. This is a real serious meeting coming up. This Dunkin' Donuts. That's it.
All right, just to springboard off of that, 2 things. Full disclosure, the reason I can't chair it is I actually have a conflict of interest with the applicant. So I actually represent them on a legal basis. So I unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I'm turning the reins over to Mr. Merman for that application. But just to continue on, I know that there are some folks who haven't had the opportunity to get in to see Ed and grab the application materials. So please,
Yes.
just to, as Dick points out, it is probably one of the more complicated applications we've had in a while. So do make an effort to get into Ed and pick up your materials. And if he's not there, I know he can make arrangements to leave them with the billing department. So if your schedule doesn't permit you to get there while he's there during his office hours,
Can I make a comment?
please do.
Just along those lines, I happen to have gotten an email today from Dee Fatavano, who's the lawyers for Dunkin' Donuts, asking for our professionals' reviews because they need time to go over them as well. So I just want to throw that out there. We still need to get those. I agree with Dick. They're still open.
Right. Mine's done. I'll have it out tomorrow morning. So
Okay.
finish it up.
And please come in and get the envelopes. I can't tell you how large they are, how much reading you're going to have. The sooner you get them from me, the better you'll be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
All right. Anything?
Aren't
And
you
just
glad you
as-
volunteered?
And just as a note, there are no members of the public in attendance, so no need to open up to the public.
Okay,
Okay.
that sounds good. All right. Well, this, as always, very productive. Appreciate everybody's time and energy coming together on these topics. There's as we've seen, there's certainly no easy answer to any of this. So your continued thoughtfulness as we navigate through the process here is greatly appreciated, and look forward to the next one. And with that, if no one has anything further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So many.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Merman. Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. All in favor?
Aye.
Always.
Any opposed, any abstained? There being none, we stand adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good night.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.